The first 7 chosen. Isabelle Laurent, theoretical physicist, expert in the nature of matter and antimatter. Alejandro Ramirez, philosopher and logician, known for his theories on existence and perception. Maria Zhang, neurobiologist, pioneer in the study of consciousness and brain functions. Ethan Blackwell, mathematician recognized for his contributions to chaos theory and higher dimensions. Anya Volkova, conceptual artist and psychologist, fascinated by the interaction between emotions and reality. Tariq al-Sheikh, computer scientist and artificial intelligence engineer, expert in self-evolutionary algorithms. Lydia Arvanitis, philosopher and cosmologist, concerned with the nature of time and space. The first dimension. The pure matter dimension. Dr. Elias chose this dimension as a starting point to test how these extraordinary people react when everything is reduced to matter and reason. Pure matter is a dimension where everything is stable and concrete, each atom having a precise role, and changes are almost impossible without direct intervention. Rational thinking and pure logic are the key to survival here. With the help of a one-way communication device, Dr. Elias and his team were able to receive signals and information from this dimension, but they could not offer help or intervene. Each person was alone in this new reality. 1. Isabelle Laurent was sent first. The moment she stepped into the dimension of pure matter, Isabelle felt absolute peace. Everything around her was stable, predictable, and without sudden changes. She discovered that any rational thought she had could be immediately transformed into a precise action, and the nature of matter was perfectly understood by her mind. But, over time, Isabelle began to realize that, without the possibility of chaos, without the unknown, pure reason began to become monotonous. The lack of unpredictable challenges made her feel empty. She communicated through her one-way device. Everything is perfect. Too perfect. My thoughts are realized with incredible clarity, but without surprise, without curiosity. What does progress mean without the unpredictable? 2. Alejandro Ramirez, the philosopher, was sent immediately after Isabelle. When he entered the dimension of pure matter, Alejandro was fascinated by the perfect order. Everything was clear, logical, and no illusion could deceive perception. For him, this dimension seemed like the utopia of rational thought, a place where all philosophical concepts were tangible and testable. But after a while, Alejandro discovered that the unanswered questions, the ones that had motivated him all his life, did not exist here. Everything had an answer, and this made him feel that there was no longer any room for true philosophy. In a transmission, he said, "Everything is clear, but this clarity suffocates me. Philosophy exists only because we have questions. Here, everything is already answered." 3. Maria Zhang, an expert in neurobiology, was sent next. Maria immediately felt the impact of the dimension on her mind. She felt an incredible clarity of thought, as if every synapse in her brain was functioning at full capacity, without emotional interference. Sensory experiences were reduced to the bare minimum. Everything was logical, but her mind, accustomed to human complexity, was beginning to wonder about the purpose of emotions and instincts. In a short transmission, she mentioned, "My mind is functioning at full capacity, but where is the mystery, where is the instinct? We are more than pure reason." 4. Ethan Blackwell, the mathematician, was next. Ethan perceived the dimension as a perfect mathematical formula. Everything was balanced, without any variation. In the first moments, he was excited by the absolute order, by the lack of chaos that in his world had fascinated and frustrated him at the same time. But as time passed, he realized that, without chaos, there is no possibility of evolution. Without uncertainty, there is no discovery. He conveyed with regret. Without chaos, there is no progress. Without unknown variables, there is no innovation. It is a safe place, but devoid of life. 5. Anya Volkova, conceptual artist and psychologist, entered next. For Anya, the pure matter dimension was a shock. Instead of the spontaneous creation she so valued, everything was governed by strict rules. Matter could not be transformed without a rational and clear intention. Her imagination, usually free and vast, was restricted by this ordered universe. She communicated, "My creativity is trapped in this reality. Without the possibility of change, there is no art. Matter is static, soulless." 6. Tariq al-Sheikh, artificial intelligence engineer, was sent to test the dimension. Tariq saw the pure matter dimension as a place where machines could thrive. Everything was rational, without uncertainty. Algorithms and the suits could function perfectly. But as he delved deeper into this world, he realized that the lack of unpredictability was a problem. Without errors, without unpredictable variables, there was no reason for adaptation or evolution. He transmitted a perfect world for machines, but without evolution. Artificial intelligence would stagnate here. Perfection is captivating, but static. 7. Lydia Arvanitis, a cosmologist, was the last sent. Lydia immediately noticed the absolute stability of the universe in the pure matter dimension. Fascinated at first by this perfect order, she began to understand that without the possibility of change, there is no expansion or evolution. The cosmos was stagnant, without movement. In her last transmission, she said, "A universe without change is a dead universe. Matter without energy, without expansion, is condemned to inactivity." Conclusion. Dr. Elias received all these transmissions and began to better understand the implications of the pure matter dimension on the human mind. A perfectly ordered reality, without chaos or unpredictability, could bring clarity, but at the same time stifle innovation, creativity, and emotion. He was preparing the next dimension, a much more challenging one, where the nature of dreams and imagination would test the limits of these extraordinary minds. After Dr. Elias had gathered all the data from the pure matter dimension, he understood that perfect balance does not mean progress and that, without unpredictability, the human mind tends to stagnate. So, for the next stage of the experiment, he decided to send the 7 participants to the dream dimension, a place where chaos and imagination rule everything, and the limits of reality are almost non-existent. The dream dimension is a place where time flows chaotically, and it is impossible to predict what is going to happen. Here, reason is just a shadow of what it was, and the mind is subject to constant illusions and transformations. Every thought or fear can come to life, and what is real and imaginary becomes impossible to separate. Dr. Elias activated the devices and sent the 7 into the dream dimension. 1.1. Isabelle Laurent was the first to step into this new reality. When Isabelle entered the dream dimension, everything changed radically. Around her, reality seemed to melt and rebuild itself every moment. Something that seemed solid became liquid in a second, and the objects around her were constantly metamorphosing. At first, Isabelle felt completely disoriented. As a physicist, accustomed to precise and constant rules, this dimension was like a blow. She felt her thoughts begin to fall apart and be controlled by the forces around her. She sent a short transmission to Dr. Elias. "There are no rules. Any concept of reality is illusory here. It is fascinating but dangerous. I have to keep my focus. Otherwise I will get lost in this chaos." 2.1. Alejandro Ramirez, the philosopher, entered immediately after Isabelle. For Alejandro, the dream dimension was an almost mystical experience. His thoughts, which were anchored in philosophical questions, began to manifest around him. He saw abstract ideas materializing in the form of symbols and figures. He was amazed by the freedom offered to him here, where any thought could become reality. However, he quickly realized that this freedom came with a price: the loss of identity and control. Without anchors in reason, the mind could wander without limits. He communicated, "Here, thinking has no limits, but without reason, it is dangerous. Reality and illusion become one, and the mind can easily get lost." 3.1. Maria Zhang, an expert in neurobiology, was next. Maria entered the dream dimension with a methodical approach, but was quickly overwhelmed by the absence of any logic. Her mind began to be invaded by illusions, and her thoughts became impossible to control. Instead of understanding how the brain works in this reality, she found herself trapped in her own fears and desires. The brain sensors that she activated before entering the dimension began to capture extreme fluctuations, which indicated an intense stimulation of all perception centers. This dimension is a brutal test for the human mind. Illusions are real, and thoughts become weapons. I lost control of my own mind. 4.1. Ethan Blackwell, the mathematician, followed Maria. For Ethan, the dream dimension was a total anomaly. Any attempt to impose formulas or logic on reality was useless. The numbers he calculated were constantly changing, and the patterns he saw in front of him fell apart and recomposed themselves without any apparent rule. He tried to find a hidden order in the chaos, but soon realized that this place did not obey any laws of nature. He communicated confusedly. There is no pattern, no rule. Each calculation self-destructs the moment it is completed. Pure chaos. 5.1. Anya Volkova, the conceptual artist, took the next step in the dimension, the dream. For Anya, this dimension was a revelation. Here, her creativity had no limits. Her thoughts transformed into spectacular images, and every emotion she felt materialized into abstract forms. It was a creative paradise, but over time, she realized that this freedom had a price. Her art could not remain constant, everything changed infinitely. Any creation was fleeting and illusory, which prevented her from completing any work. She conveyed fascinated, but frustrated. Here everything is art. But everything falls apart before it can be finished. Beautiful but fleeting. 6.1. Tariq al-Sheikh, the artificial intelligence engineer, was the next to be tested. Tariq tried to impose algorithms and order on this dimension, but quickly discovered that binary logic could not survive here. His algorithms distorted in unpredictable ways, and any form of technological reasoning fell apart before he could control it. The machines, the artificial intelligence concepts he tried to apply, turned into dreams, and their structures changed in an instant. Artificial intelligence is useless here. There are no rules, only thoughts and emotions that become reality. Chaos is the only constant. 7.1. Lydia Arvanitis, the cosmologist, was the last one. Lydia was fascinated by the fluid nature of time and space in the dream dimension. She saw how stars and galaxies formed and destroyed in a matter of seconds. The cosmos was in a constant metamorphosis, and time flowed in all directions simultaneously. However, the impossibility of understanding or predicting these changes began to worry her. Without a constant, without an anchor, the dimension seemed to be a place where any cosmic structure was an illusion. Time and space are completely illusory here. There are no laws that govern the universe in this dimension. Everything changes before it can be understood. Conclusion. After receiving these transmissions from the dream dimension, Doctor Elias understood that although this dimension offered absolute freedom, the risks of losing identity and reason were great. The pure matter dimension was safe, but static, while the dream dimension was vibrant and dynamic, but full of mental and emotional dangers. Dr. Elias carefully analyzed the transmissions received from the dream dimension and concluded that the tests were much more complex than he had anticipated. The two dimensions explored so far, pure matter and the dream, offered opposing perspectives on reality. In the first, absolute order dominated, and in the second, uncontrolled chaos. However, neither of them seemed to offer the ideal balance for the human mind. Chapter 2. The Forbidden Experiment. Now it was time for the dimension of intuitive consciousness, a place where reason and emotion coexisted, but decisions made based on intuition and instinct prevailed. This was a different dimension, where beings perceived truth beyond logic and the senses, where connections were understood without rational explanation, and where everything happened in harmony with the natural flow of emotions. 1.2. The first step in the dimension of intuitive consciousness. Isabelle Lauron, as a scientist, always struggled to understand everything through calculations and physical laws. However, in this new dimension, every known law disappeared. Reality itself was a reflection of her deepest intuitions. Isabelle felt her mind trying to cling to rules, but over time she understood that she had to give in to this dimension. Instead of trying to control everything, she learned to accept what she felt without